They called her just a co-pilot. 10 minutes later, the entire U.S. military realized they were facing the deadliest pilot in the sky. The collision alarm shrieked through the cockpit of Pacific 227 like a banshee announcing the end of the world. Emily Walsh's hands moved before her mind could catch up, fingers dancing across the instrument panel with a fluidity that seemed almost choreographed. Outside the reinforced glass, 37,000 feet above the South China Sea, two shadows materialized from the cloud bank, like predators emerging from tall grass. MiG-29s, Russian-built, Chinese markings. The radio crackled with a voice cold enough to freeze jet fuel. Unidentified aircraft, you are violating sovereign airspace. Turn back immediately, or you will be shot down. You have 60 seconds to comply. The accent was unmistakably Russian, the words delivered with the mechanical precision of someone who had made this threat before and followed through. Emily glanced to her left. Captain David Morrison sat rigid in the pilot's seat, his face the color of old newspaper, both hands clutching his chest as if trying to hold his heart inside his body. His eyes had rolled back, showing nothing but white. Cardiac arrest at 37,000 feet, 287 passengers, one unconscious pilot, two fighter jets with missiles locked and loaded, and her. The co-pilot's seat suddenly felt very small. Through the center windscreen, one of the MiGs rolled closer, close enough that Emily could see the pilot's helmet, the red star painted on the fuselage, the AA-12 missiles hanging beneath its swept wings like venomous fangs waiting to bite. Pacific 227, this is your final warning. Emily reached for the radio, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting in her chest. Copy, Interceptor, Pacific 227 declaring medical emergency. Request immediate. The cockpit door exploded inward. A wall of khaki and oak leaf clusters filled the doorway. Colonel Marcus Harrison stood 6'3", his chest decorated with enough ribbons to start a textile factory, his jaw set in the unmistakable expression of a man who believed he was born to command and everyone else was born to obey. Behind him crowded 4 more uniforms, their faces arranged in varying degrees of concern and aggression. Move aside, miss. Harrison's voice carried the weight of 3 decades of barking orders at subordinates who wouldn't dare question him. His eyes swept over Emily, cataloging and dismissing her in a single glance. This is a military situation now. You're just a commercial pilot. Emily's hands remained on the controls. I said move. He stepped forward, his shadow falling across the instrument panel. I've got 1,500 hours in rotary wing aircraft and more combat deployments than you've had birthday candles. What have you got? A turboprop rating and a smile? The MiG on the left performed a barrel roll, close enough that the Boeing shuddered in its wake turbulence. The 60-second clock in Emily's head continued its relentless countdown. Colonel, she said, her voice quiet but clear, I need you to step back. Harrison's face reddened. In 28 years of military service, from the dusty streets of Fallujah to the mountain passes of Afghanistan, no one had told him to step back. Certainly not some slip of a woman who barely looked old enough to vote, let alone fly a commercial aircraft through hostile airspace. Listen here, sweetheart. Captain Morrison is in cardiac arrest. Emily cut him off without raising her voice. We have 2 hostile interceptors with weapons hot, 287 souls on board, and approximately 40 seconds before they decide whether to shoot us down or let us explain. I need you to either help or leave. Those are your only options. For a fraction of a second, something flickered in Harrison's eyes. Not respect exactly, but perhaps a grudging acknowledgement that this woman wasn't cowering the way he'd expected, but only for a fraction of a second. Lieutenant Mitchell, Harrison barked over his shoulder, get this civilian out of my seat. A younger officer pushed forward, his face arranged in the cocky grin of someone who had never met a problem he couldn't solve with confidence and a firm handshake. Brad Mitchell, 26 years old, the kind of pilot who talked about himself in the third person and genuinely believed everyone found it charming. Don't worry, sweetheart, Mitchell said, reaching for Emily's shoulder. The grown-ups are here now. Why don't you go check on the passengers, maybe bring us some coffee once we've saved everyone's lives? His hand closed on her shoulder and stopped. Something in the way Emily sat, spine straight as a steel beam, shoulders squared, chin level, made him hesitate. She hadn't flinched, hadn't looked at his hand, hadn't acknowledged his existence at all. Her attention remained fixed on the approaching MiG, her eyes tracking its movement with an intensity that seemed almost predatory. Interceptor flight, she said into the radio, switching languages mid-sentence. Это Pacific 227. У нас медицинская аварийная ситуация на борту. Командир самолета недееспособен. Запрашиваем гуманитарный коридор. Perfect Russian. Not textbook Russian, but the kind of Russian that came from years of immersion, from conversations in smoke-filled briefing rooms and static-filled radio transmissions over hostile territory. Mitchell's hand fell away from her shoulder. Colonel Harrison's eyes narrowed. You speak Russian? Emily didn't answer. The radio crackled with the MiG pilot's response. Curt, suspicious, but lacking the immediate threat of the previous transmission. She responded in kind, her accent shifting subtly to match his, her words clipped and professional. Behind Harrison, a new figure pushed through the crowded doorway. Viktor Kozlov was 62 years old, silver-haired, immaculately dressed in a suit that cost more than most people's cars. He carried himself with the swagger of a man who had spent his entire life being the most important person in every room he entered. What is happening here? His accent was thick, Eastern European, his voice accustomed to being obeyed. I am former fighter pilot, Soviet Air Force, 300 combat missions. I should be flying this aircraft, not this girl. Karen Wells appeared behind him, the chief flight attendant's face pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. She's just the co-pilot, Karen said, her voice trembling. Surely one of these military gentlemen, or Mr. Kozlov, someone with real experience. I have more experience than everyone on this aircraft combined, Kozlov declared, already moving toward the cockpit. Step aside, Devushka. Let a real pilot take control. Emily's response was to reach up and adjust her headset with her left hand, while her right made a minute correction to the yoke. The Boeing tilted almost imperceptibly, sliding into a new trajectory that put the MiGs slightly off their optimal intercept angle. It was such a small movement that almost no one noticed. Almost. In the back of the group, a man with salt and pepper hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent decades squinting into foreign suns watched the adjustment with sudden interest. Master Chief Thomas Grant had served 34 years in the United States Navy, from the engine rooms of destroyers to the flight decks of carriers. He knew military bearing when he saw it. And this woman, this supposedly civilian co-pilot, had just performed a combat positioning maneuver that most commercial pilots wouldn't recognize, let alone execute. Sirs, Grant said quietly, his voice cutting through the chaos with the calm authority of experience. Might want to give the ladies some room to work. Harrison turned on him. Master Chief, I didn't ask for your input. No, sir, you didn't. Grant's eyes never left Emily. Just an observation, sir. The radio exploded with angry Russian. The lead MiG had broken formation, sweeping around to approach from the Boeing's blind spot. On the threat display, a new warning flashed. Radar lock. They were being painted for a missile shot. Before we continue with this incredible story of hidden warriors walking among us, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. You will not want to miss what happens next, because this civilian pilot is about to show these military officers something that will make your jaw drop. Trust me, the reveal coming up will blow your mind. Now, back to the cockpit. Emily's fingers moved across the communication panel with practiced efficiency, switching frequencies, adjusting gain, her movements carrying the unconscious economy of someone who had performed these actions thousands of times under pressure. Pacific 227, this is Manila Center. We're showing you squawking 7700. Confirm emergency status. Manila Center, Pacific 227, confirming medical emergency and hostile intercept. Requesting immediate coordination with U.S. military assets in the area. We have 2 hostile fighters with weapons locked. Harrison leaned forward. Now, wait just a minute. You don't have the authority to... Colonel. Emily's voice remained level, but something in its tone made Harrison stop mid-sentence. In an aviation emergency, the pilot in command has absolute authority. That's Federal Aviation Regulation 91.3. Right now, that pilot is me. So, either help me save these passengers, or take a seat in the cabin and let me work. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Lieutenant Mitchell let out a bark of laughter. Did she just pull regulations on you, sir? This is priceless. Some coffee-fetching co-pilot thinks she can... Mitchell, Harrison's voice was ice. Shut up. He turned back to Emily, studying her with new eyes. Not friendly eyes. Nothing about Marcus Harrison was friendly, but reassessing eyes. the eyes of a man who had survived 3 decades of warfare by never underestimating an opponent twice. "Fine," he said finally. "You've got the stick, but the second I think you're in over your head, I'm taking command. Are we clear?" Emily didn't acknowledge him. Her attention was fixed on the threat display, watching the Migs flight patterns with an intensity that seemed almost unnatural. "He's going to try a close pass," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Standard intimidation maneuver. Afterburner at the last second to rattle the passengers. "How could you possibly know?" Kozlov began. The words died in his throat as the lead MiG did exactly that, screaming past the Boeing's nose close enough to rattle the windows, its afterburner painting the clouds orange before pulling up into a vertical climb. In the cabin behind them, passengers screamed. Emily had already anticipated the wake turbulence, adjusting the Boeing's attitude to minimize the impact. The aircraft shuddered but held steady. "Sloppy," she said quietly, almost to herself. His instructor would be disappointed. Master Chief Grant's eyes widened slightly. That wasn't a guess. That was an assessment. The kind of assessment that came from hundreds of hours watching student pilots make mistakes. The kind of assessment that came from teaching them not to. Karen Wells had wedged herself into a corner of the cockpit, her professional composure crumbling by the second. "We're all going to die," she whispered. "We're all going to die, and it's because we let her stay in command. Someone needs to do something. Someone with actual experience." "Ma'am," Grant said gently, "I think she knows what she's doing." "She's a co-pilot," Karen's voice cracked. "She probably got her license from some online course. These military officers have actual combat experience. Mr. Kozlov flew in real wars. What has she done? Fly tourists to Hawaii?" In the pilot's seat, Emily heard every word. Her expression didn't change. She'd heard worse, much worse. The radio crackled with a new frequency. Military band, encrypted. The kind of channel that commercial aircraft weren't supposed to be able to access. Emily's hand moved to the communication panel, her fingers finding the correct switches without looking. "Pacific 227, this is Strike Group 7 aboard USS Ronald Reagan. We are tracking your situation. Confirm your status and intentions." Emily keyed the mic. "Strike 7, Pacific 227. We have 2 hostile interceptors, weapons locked, and a pilot down from cardiac arrest, requesting immediate assistance. Our current heading is..." She stopped. A memory surfaced, unbidden. Smoke-filled skies, the screech of missile alerts, a voice on the radio calling a name that hadn't been spoken in 5 years. She shook it off. "Our current heading is 270, Angels 37, airspeed 480 knots. Requesting fighter escort if available. Copy, Pacific 227. We have assets that can reach you in approximately 15 minutes. Can you maintain current position?" 15 minutes. Against 2 MiGs with itchy trigger fingers and a cabin full of panicking passengers. It might as well have been 15 years. "We'll manage, Strike 7. Emily's voice carried a certainty that surprised even her. "Just get those birds in the air." Harrison was staring at her. "How did you access that frequency? That's a classified military band." Emily ignored him. On the threat display, the second MiG was maneuvering into an attack position. "He's setting up for a gun run," she said. "Testing our reactions, seeing if we'll break formation." "How can you possibly, Gisiti?" Mitchell began. Emily put the Boeing into a gentle bank, adjusting altitude by 300 feet, changing their position just enough to throw off the MiG's calculated approach. It was a subtle move, the kind of thing passengers wouldn't even notice, but it forced the fighter pilot to recalculate his entire attack vector. "That's not possible," Kozlov whispered. His face had gone pale. "A commercial aircraft cannot maneuver like that. The stress tolerances, the passenger safety protocols. The Boeing 7 can sustain up to 2.5 Gs in an emergency situation," Emily said, her voice clinical. "We're currently at 1.2. Well, within acceptable parameters." She spoke like someone reading from a technical manual, but the knowledge, the casual familiarity with airframe limitations, that spoke to something else entirely. Master Chief Grant leaned against the cockpit doorframe, his arms crossed, watching the young woman with growing fascination. He'd spent over 3 decades around military pilots, had seen hundreds of them in action. He knew the body language, the unconscious habits, the way combat aviators carried themselves. This woman had all of it. The MiG completed its run, pulling away at the last second. Emily had read his intentions correctly, anticipated his movements, and positioned the Boeing to minimize the threat, all without appearing to exert any effort at all. "Lieutenant," Harrison said slowly, "pull up this woman's file. I want to know everything about her." Mitchell was already on his phone, fingers flying across the screen. Emily Walsh, age 34, hired by Pacific Airways 6 years ago, previous employment, various regional carriers, nothing special, flight school in Arizona, ATP certificate, type ratings for 737 and 7, completely unremarkable. "There's nothing remarkable about this woman," Karen agreed, eager to validate her own doubts. "She's just a co-pilot. My cousin is a co-pilot, and he can barely parallel park." Emily reached up to adjust the overhead panel, and for just a moment, her sleeve pulled back from her wrist. Grant saw it first, a flash of scar tissue, raised and white against her skin. Not just any scar, a pattern, a shape that he recognized from trauma surgeries on aircraft carriers. The kind of wound that came from ejection handles, from emergency escapes, from cockpits being torn apart at Mach 1.2. "Ma'am," he said quietly, pitching his voice so only Emily could hear, "you want to tell me where a civilian pilot gets ejection scars?" Emily pulled her sleeve down, her expression unchanging. "Childhood accident." "Ma'am, with respect, I've seen those scars on 100 pilots. That's not from falling off a bicycle." She didn't answer. The radio crackled again. The MiG pilot's voice, angrier now, demanding they change course or face consequences. Emily responded in Russian, her tone calm, professional, but with an undertone of steel that made the hair stand up on Grant's neck. She was negotiating, and not like a civilian pleading for mercy, like an equal, matching the MiG pilot's aggression with quiet confidence. "Who the hell are you?" Harrison muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The next hour stretched like taffy, each minute lasting an eternity. The MiGs maintained their threatening posture, making periodic close passes that sent passengers screaming and flight attendants scrambling. Through it all, Emily remained at the controls, her hands steady, her voice calm, her eyes never leaving the instruments. She was watching the fighters the way a chess grandmaster watches an opponent's pieces, not reacting to their movements, but predicting them. When the lead MiG feinted left, she was already adjusting the Boeing's heading. When the wingman dropped altitude, she compensated before his maneuver was complete. Every move they made, she anticipated. Every threat they presented, she neutralized. And through it all, she barely spoke. The cabin had descended into controlled chaos. Dr. Angela Park, a petite woman with kind eyes and steady hands, had taken charge of Captain Morrison, directing passengers to help move him to a more stable position while she administered what emergency care she could with the limited medical supplies on board. She'd looked at Emily once as the cockpit door opened to let someone through, and something had passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. Grant noticed that too. "The doctor," he said to Harrison. "She knows something." "Everyone on this aircraft knows something," Harrison snapped. "The question is what?" Mitchell had given up on his phone, the signal too weak at this altitude to access anything useful. He stood in the corner of the cockpit, his earlier bravado deflated, watching Emily with an expression that had shifted from contempt to confusion. "She's not even sweating," he muttered. "We've got 2 hostile fighters pointing guns at us, and she's not even sweating." "Maybe she's stupid," Kozlov suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. "Too ignorant to understand the danger." "She understands the danger," Grant said quietly. "She understands it better than any of us." A new alarm blared, fuel warning. The extended time in the air, the detours to avoid the MiG's attack vectors, had eaten into their reserves faster than normal operations would allow. "We're burning through fuel," Emily reported, her voice clinical. "At current consumption, we have approximately 90 minutes before we need to divert or ditch." "Ditch?" Karen's voice rose an octave. "You mean crash into the ocean. I mean controlled water landing. Different thing." "Different thing? Different thing? We're going to die and you're arguing semantics." Harrison stepped forward. "Enough. Walsh, if that's even your real name, what's your plan here?" Emily's hands never stopped moving across the controls. "USS Reagan is scrambling fighters. Once they arrive, the MiGs will disengage. We proceed to Guam for emergency landing. Captain Morrison receives medical care. Everyone goes home. And if the MiGs don't disengage, they will." "How can you be so sure?" Emily finally looked at him, and something in her gray eyes made Harrison take an involuntary step back. It wasn't hostility. It wasn't fear. It was something else. something that spoke of experiences far beyond the sterile world of commercial aviation. "Because I know how this game is played, Colonel. And right now, they're losing." Before Harrison could respond, a new voice crackled over the radio. American this time, military call sign, the crisp efficiency of naval aviation. "Pacific 227, this is Whiskey Flight, Strike Fighter Squadron 154 off the Reagan. We are 8 miles out and inbound hot. Confirm your position and status." Emily's hand moved to the radio, but something in the voice made her hesitate, just for a fraction of a second. "Copy. Whiskey Flight, Pacific 227 at Angels 37, heading 270, 2 hostile interceptors maintaining escort position, requesting immediate assistance." "Roger that, 227. We've got you on radar. ETA 2 minutes. Those bandits are about to have a very bad day." A pause. "Hey, 227, that was some nice flying back there. Whoever's driving that bus knows their stuff." Emily's finger slipped on the radio button. For just a moment, her composure cracked. "Copy, Whiskey Flight. Just doing my job." "Roger that. Whiskey Flight out." As the American fighters approached, the Migs began to back off. Not retreating, Chinese pilots didn't retreat, but repositioning, creating distance between themselves and the now escorted airliner. Harrison watched the radar display as the American FA-18s took up protective positions around the Boeing. "They're breaking off." "Told you they would." Emily's voice was flat, empty of triumph. The crisis wasn't over. Captain Morrison was still unconscious, they were still low on fuel, and they were still hours from the nearest safe landing site. But the immediate threat had passed. For the first time in nearly an hour, Emily allowed herself to breathe. Master Chief Grant was still watching her, still cataloging the inconsistencies, the impossible knowledge, the skills that no commercial pilot should possess. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "when this is over, I think we need to have a conversation." Emily didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the lead FA-18, now visible through the cockpit window, its pilot holding formation with the easy grace of someone who had practiced this maneuver 1,000 times. Something in her expression shifted, sadness perhaps, or nostalgia, or regret. The next 40 minutes passed in tense silence. The FA-18s maintained their escort position, a visible reminder to anyone watching that American military assets were now involved. The Migs had retreated to international airspace, still visible on radar, but no longer presenting an immediate threat. In the cabin, Dr. Park had stabilized Captain Morrison, though he remained unconscious. The initial panic had given way to exhausted relief, passengers slumping in their seats, some crying quietly, others staring out the windows at the sleek fighters flanking their aircraft. In the cockpit, the atmosphere had shifted from crisis mode to something more complex. Harrison stood against the bulkhead, arms crossed, studying Emily with the intensity of a detective piecing together a crime scene. Mitchell had retreated to the back of the group, his earlier arrogance replaced by sullen silence. Kozlov had stopped talking entirely, his claims of 300 combat missions suddenly seeming hollow. Only Grant remained close, positioned near the cockpit door, watching everything with the patient vigilance of someone who had learned long ago that the most important details often hid in plain sight. "We're 30 minutes from Anderson," Emily reported, referring to the Air Force Base on Guam. "I've coordinated with approach control. Emergency services will be standing by for Captain Morrison." "Good." Harrison's voice was grudging. "Anything else we should know?" "Fuel state is marginal but manageable. Weather is clear for approach. No further threats on radar." She paused. "Unless you count the 17 journalists who've apparently already gotten wind of this and are waiting on the tarmac." Mitchell snorted. "Great. Just what we need." "It's what you need," Grant said quietly. "Every camera on that tarmac is going to see U.S. military escorting American civilians to safety. That's the kind of story that writes itself." He was right, of course. The narrative had already shifted from potential international incident to heroic rescue. The military presence, the dramatic escort, the endangered passengers. It was the kind of story that made careers and shaped public opinion. And at the center of it all, a young co-pilot who had somehow held everything together. Karen Wells had composed herself enough to resume something approximating her professional duties. She moved through the first-class cabin, offering water and reassurances to the shell-shocked passengers, her earlier doubts carefully hidden behind a practiced smile. But Grant noticed how she avoided looking toward the cockpit, how her hands shook when she thought no one was watching. Fear had a way of revealing people's true natures. Some rose to the occasion, others— "You did good work," he said to Emily, pitching his voice low enough that only she could hear. Most pilots would have folded under that pressure. Most pilots haven't had to deal with 2 Migs and a cardiac arrest at the same time. "That's not what I mean, ma'am, and I think you know it." Emily's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I appreciate the sentiment, Master Chief. But right now, I just want to get these people on the ground safely." And after that, she didn't answer. The approach to Anderson was textbook smooth, the Boeing descending through scattered clouds as the FA-18s peeled away, their mission complete. On the tarmac below, Emily could see the flashing lights of emergency vehicles, the cluster of journalists and cameras, the organized chaos of a military base responding to a high-profile emergency. "Pacific 227, Anderson Tower. You're cleared for approach, runway 06 left. Emergency services are standing by. Welcome to Guam." "Copy, Anderson. Pacific 227 on approach, runway 06 left." The landing was as smooth as the approach, the Boeing's wheels touching down with barely a bump. Emily guided the aircraft toward the designated parking area, where a swarm of vehicles waited. Ambulances for Captain Morrison, buses for the passengers, black SUVs for whoever was important enough to warrant immediate attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced over the intercom, "we have landed safely at Anderson Air Force Base on Guam. Please remain seated until the aircraft comes to a complete stop. Medical personnel will be boarding shortly. On behalf of Pacific Airways, I apologize for the disruption to your travel plans and thank you for your patience during this emergency." It was the standard announcement, the same words spoken thousands of times a day on aircraft around the world. But somehow, coming from Emily Walsh, they carried a weight that the script had never intended. Harrison was the first one out of the cockpit, eager to take command of whatever came next. Mitchell followed, already rehearsing how he would describe the experience to whoever would listen. Kozlov slipped away quietly, his earlier bluster completely deflated. Karen Wells brushed past Emily without a word, her earlier accusations apparently forgotten, or at least temporarily suppressed. Only Grant remained. "Ma'am," he said, "I've been in the military for 34 years. I've seen combat pilots, transport pilots, every kind of aviator you can imagine. And I've never seen anyone handle a situation like you just did." Emily began running through the post-flight checklist, her hands moving automatically through the familiar routine. "I got lucky, Master Chief. Sometimes luck is the only thing that matters. Luck didn't teach you to speak Russian. Luck didn't teach you those combat maneuvers. And luck sure as heck didn't give you those ejection scars." He leaned forward slightly. "Who are you really, Ms. Walsh?" For a long moment, the cockpit was silent, except for the ticking of cooling engines and the distant shouts of ground crew. Then Emily looked up, and something in her eyes made Grant's breath catch. Pain. Deep old pain, the kind that never fully healed. "I'm just a pilot, Master Chief. That's all I've ever wanted to be." "But that's not all you are, is it?" She turned away, reaching for the cockpit door release. "That's all I'm allowed to be, not anymore." The base commander was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. Admiral James Wheeler, 3 stars gleaming on his collar, the kind of officer who had been running aircraft carriers when most people were still learning to drive. Behind him stood a crowd of uniforms, journalists, and confused civilian officials, all jockeying for position in what was rapidly becoming a media circus. "Colonel Harrison," Wheeler said, extending his hand, "heard you had quite an adventure up there." Harrison accepted the handshake with the practiced ease of someone who had been receiving praise from superior officers his entire career. "Just doing what needed to be done, Admiral. Though I should mention," he gestured vaguely toward the aircraft, "the co-pilot handled herself adequately." Wheeler's eyes tracked past Harrison to where Emily was descending the stairs, her Pacific Airways uniform rumpled, but otherwise bearing no sign of the chaos she'd just endured. She moved with an unusual economy of motion, each step precise, controlled. "That's the co-pilot?" "Yes, sir. Emily Walsh, according to her credentials." "According to her credentials." Wheeler's eyes narrowed slightly. "Interesting choice of words, Colonel." Before Harrison could respond, a commotion erupted near the stairs. Captain Morrison was being loaded onto a gurney, conscious now, his color slowly returning. "Doctor." Park walked beside him, speaking quietly to the paramedics. "He'll be okay," she reported as Wheeler approached. "Myocardial infarction, but we got him stabilized. Another few minutes without intervention, and it would have been a very different story." "The co-pilot got us down," Morrison croaked, his voice weak but determined. "Whatever she did up there, however she did it, she saved all our lives." Wheeler looked again toward Emily, who had detached herself from the crowd and was standing alone near the nose of the aircraft, watching the organized chaos with an expression that was difficult to read. "Interesting," he murmured. "Very interesting." Grant appeared at Wheeler's elbow, having navigated through the crowd with the practiced ease of someone who had spent decades moving through military bureaucracies. "Admiral, permission to speak freely?" "Always, Master Chief. What's on your mind?" "That woman isn't who she says she is. I've been watching her for the past 2 hours. The way she moves, the way she talks, the things she knows. That's not a civilian pilot. That's military, and not just any military." Wheeler's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes sharpened. "Go on." "She accessed classified military frequencies like she was ordering coffee. She performed combat maneuvers in a Boeing 777 that most fighter pilots couldn't pull off. She negotiated with those MiG pilots in Russian like she'd done it 100 times before." Grant paused. "And, sir, she has ejection scars. I saw them, fresh enough that they can't be more than 5, maybe 6 years old." "Ejection scars?" Wheeler's voice was very quiet. "You're certain?" "Positive, sir. I've seen enough of them to know." The Admiral was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the solitary figure standing near the aircraft. Then he reached for his radio. "This is Wheeler. I need a priority database search. Subject is a female pilot, approximately early to mid-30s, apparently working civilian aviation, but with military-level skills and possible naval aviation background. Focus on any personnel who went MIA or were reported KIA in the South China Sea Theater in the past 6 years." There was a pause, and then, "Also, look for any call signs associated with the Top Gun program during the same period. Specifically, anything involving the designation Phantom." Grant's eyebrows rose. "Sir?" "Just a hunch, Master Chief." Wheeler's eyes never left Emily. "But in my experience, there's only one kind of pilot who could do what she just did, and if I'm right, we're looking at either a miracle or a ghost." The crowd was beginning to thin as passengers were processed and journalists corralled. Wheeler moved through the chaos with the easy authority of someone who had been in command for most of his adult life, making his way toward the lone figure still standing near the aircraft. Emily saw him coming. Her posture shifted almost imperceptibly, shoulders squaring, spine straightening, the unconscious response of someone who had spent years snapping to attention in the presence of flag officers. Wheeler noticed, and filed the information away. "Ms. Walsh," he said, stopping a respectful distance away. "I'm Admiral James Wheeler, Base Commander. I wanted to personally thank you for your actions today." "Just doing my job, Admiral." Her voice was neutral, carefully controlled. "Your job, yes." Wheeler studied her face, looking for cracks in the facade. "Captain Morrison tells me you handled those MiGs like you'd been doing it your whole life. Said you knew what they were going to do before they did it." "Lucky guesses." "Uh-huh." Wheeler didn't believe that for a second, and his expression said as much. "You know, I've been in naval aviation for 32 years, flown Hornets off carriers in 3 different conflicts, and I've never seen anyone, military or civilian, do what you did today." Emily's expression didn't change. "The aircraft did most of the work, Admiral. I just pointed it in the right direction." "The aircraft," Wheeler nodded slowly. "The aircraft that you somehow convinced to perform split-S maneuvers at 37,000 feet. The aircraft that you flew like it was an FA-18 instead of a commercial passenger jet." He paused. "That aircraft?" For just a moment, something flickered in Emily's eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by the same careful neutrality she'd maintained since landing. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Admiral." "I'm not implying anything, Ms. Walsh. I'm stating facts." He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I've ordered a database search on your background. If there's something you want to tell me before those results come back, now would be the time." Emily met his gaze without flinching. "There's nothing to tell, Admiral. I'm a co-pilot for Pacific Airways. I've been flying commercial aircraft for 6 years. That's all. That's all." Wheeler repeated the words slowly, tasting them for truth. "Then you won't mind if I ask you a few more questions while we wait for your aircraft to be cleared? Am I being detained? Invited. There's a difference." "Barely." Wheeler smiled slightly. It wasn't a friendly smile. "Humor me, Ms. Walsh. After what you did today, you've earned at least that much consideration." They walked in silence toward the base operations building, Grant falling into step behind them with the practiced ease of an NCO who had learned long ago when to follow and when to lead. Around them, the controlled chaos of the emergency response continued, passengers being interviewed, journalists being managed, aircraft being inspected. Inside the operations building, Wheeler led them to a small conference room, closing the door behind them with a soft click that somehow seemed louder than the chaos they'd left behind. "Please, have a seat." Emily remained standing. "I prefer not to." "As you wish." Wheeler settled into one of the chairs, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. "Let's start with something simple. Where did you learn to speak Russian?" "Night school. After I got my pilot's license, I thought it might be useful to learn additional languages." "Night school." Wheeler's skepticism was evident. "And this night school taught you to negotiate with hostile fighter pilots using military protocols and tactical terminology." "I watch a lot of movies," Grant snorted from his position near the door. Wheeler shot him a warning look before turning back to Emily. "How about the combat maneuvers? Where did you learn to fly a commercial aircraft like a fighter jet?" "Simulation training. Pacific Airways has excellent facilities." "Simulation training." Wheeler leaned forward slightly. "Ms. Walsh, I've been polite so far. I've given you every opportunity to come clean, but my patience has limits, and you're rapidly approaching them." Emily's expression remained unchanged. "Admiral, I don't know what you want me to say. I'm a commercial pilot who got caught in a bad situation and did my best to handle it. That's the beginning, middle, and end of the story. Is it?" Wheeler reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, glancing at the screen. "Because my people just pulled your Pacific Airways personnel file. And it's remarkably thin. 6 years of employment, no disciplinary issues, no notable incidents, no background before your initial hiring that anyone can verify. I like my privacy." Privacy is one thing, a completely fabricated identity is another. For the first time since the conversation began, something shifted in Emily's posture. It was subtle, a slight tension in her shoulders, a barely perceptible tightening of her jaw. But Wheeler caught it. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't you?" Wheeler set the phone down on the table. "Here's what I think happened. I think you're a military pilot, Navy probably, based on your skill set. I think something happened to you 5 or 6 years ago, something serious enough that you dropped off the radar completely. And I think you've been hiding ever since, using a civilian identity to stay under the radar." Emily said nothing. "What I don't know," Wheeler continued, "is why. What happened that made you disappear? What are you running from? And perhaps most importantly, who are you really?" The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. Then Emily spoke, her voice very quiet. "Admiral, with all due respect, my past is none of your business. I did my job today. I saved 287 passengers and got them safely on the ground. That's what matters. What matters is the truth. The truth is overrated." Emily finally moved, walking to the window and staring out at the tarmac where her aircraft still sat, surrounded by emergency vehicles. Sometimes the best thing you can do is let sleeping dogs lie, and sometimes those sleeping dogs wake up and bite you. She turned back to face him. "Is that a threat, Admiral?" "It's a statement of fact." Wheeler stood, moving to stand beside her at the window. "You can't hide forever, Ms. Walsh, if that's even your real name. The world has a way of finding people who don't want to be found. And when it does, wouldn't you rather have allies than enemies?" Emily was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "You have no idea what you're asking. Then tell me, help me understand." She shook her head slowly. "Some doors are better left closed, Admiral. Trust me on that." Before Wheeler could respond, the door burst open. A young officer stood in the doorway, slightly out of breath. "Admiral, sir, we've got a situation. The FA-18 pilots are requesting permission to land. And, sir," he hesitated, glancing at Emily, "the flight leader says he has personal business with the co-pilot from Pacific 227. Wheeler's eyebrows rose. "Personal business?" "That's what he said, sir. Commander Jake Torres, call sign Whiskey." Something shifted in Emily's expression, a flash of recognition, quickly suppressed, but not quickly enough. Wheeler noticed. "Commander Torres, now why would an FA-18 pilot have personal business with a civilian co-pilot he's never met?" "I have no idea," Emily said, but her voice had changed, losing some of its careful neutrality. "Well then," Wheeler moved toward the door. Let's find out. The tarmac was even more chaotic now, with the addition of two FA-18s that had just touched down and were taxiing toward the operations area. Their engines whined as they shut down, the cockpits opening to reveal the pilots inside. Commander Jake Torres was the first out of his aircraft, dropping down the ladder with the easy grace of someone who had done it thousands of times. He was tall, dark-haired, with the kind of weathered face that came from years of squinting into tropical suns at Mach 2. He removed his helmet as he walked, scanning the crowd with obvious purpose. "Whiskey." Wheeler intercepted him before he could get far. "Welcome back. I understand you have business with our civilian pilot." Torres's eyes locked onto Emily, who was hanging back near the operations building, and something electric passed between them. "Admiral," Torres said slowly, "request permission to speak with that woman privately." "Denied. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of me." Torres hesitated. His eyes moved from Emily to Wheeler and back again, calculating. "Sir, with all due respect, that phrase usually precedes something extremely disrespectful, Commander. Whatever your business is with Ms. Walsh, I want to hear it." Torres was silent for a long moment, then he sighed. "Fine. Admiral, when we were inbound to the Intercept, I heard her on the radio coordinating with Strike Group 7, and there was a moment, just a split second, when she slipped up. Slipped up how? She started to give our call sign response, the military protocol for acknowledging escort instructions, the one that only carrier pilots know." Torres's voice dropped. "And she almost said a call sign, one I haven't heard in 5 years. Wheeler's eyes narrowed. "What call sign?" Torres looked at Emily. She stood frozen, her face pale. "Phantom," he said quietly. "She almost said Phantom acknowledges." The word hung in the air like smoke. Wheeler turned to face Emily fully. "Phantom. Now, why would a civilian co-pilot know that particular call sign?" Emily said nothing. Her hands were trembling slightly. "Commander Torres," Wheeler continued, "you served at Top Gun, didn't you? Tell me about the call sign Phantom." Torres's jaw tightened. "Sir, Phantom is a legend. One of the best instructors Top Gun ever produced. Trained hundreds of pilots over 8 years. Some of the best carrier aviators in the fleet learned everything they know from Phantom." "And what happened to this Phantom?" "Killed in action, sir. South China Sea, 5 years ago. At least, that's what the official report says." Wheeler turned back to Emily. "Is there anything you would like to add to that, Ms. Walsh?" Silence. Then, "The official reports say a lot of things, Admiral. That doesn't make them true. So, you admit you know about Phantom?" Emily's eyes found Torres's. Something passed between them, recognition, pain, years of shared history compressed into a single glance. "I know about a lot of things," she said quietly. "That doesn't mean I have to talk about them." Torres stepped forward. "Emily," his voice cracked on the name. "It's really you, isn't it? Jake? 5 years." His voice was thick with emotion. 5 years we thought you were dead. I was at your memorial service. I spoke at your memorial service, and the whole time you were alive? You were flying civilian aircraft while we mourned you?" Emily's composure finally cracked. Tears welled in her eyes, though she fought to keep them from falling. "You don't understand. Then help me understand." Torres' voice rose. "Help me understand why the woman who taught me everything I know, the woman who saved my life more times than I can count, decided to fake her own death and disappear. Because I had no choice." The words exploded out of her, raw and anguished. Around them, the crowd had stopped moving, drawn by the intensity of the confrontation. Wheeler held up a hand, silencing the murmurs. "Commander Torres, stand down. Ms. Walsh." He paused. "Or should I say, Commander Walsh? I think it's time you started telling us the truth." Emily's shoulders sagged. The fight seemed to drain out of her, leaving behind something smaller, more fragile. "Lieutenant Commander," she said quietly. "Lieutenant Commander Emily Walsh, call sign Phantom. Former lead instructor, Naval Fighter Weapons School, Miramar." Wheeler nodded slowly. "And the death in the South China Sea?" "A cover story. Necessary for operational reasons." "What kind of operational reasons require faking your own death?" Emily shook her head. "That's classified, Admiral. Above your pay grade, with respect. My pay grade is pretty high. Not high enough for this." Before Wheeler could press further, Colonel Harrison pushed his way through the crowd. He'd been watching the confrontation from a distance, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to something approaching horror. "Wait," he said. You're telling me that the woman I tried to remove from that cockpit is a Top Gun instructor? A decorated naval aviator? Emily turned to face him. Was, Colonel, past tense. But you... Harrison's face reddened. I called you a coffee fetcher. I told Mitchell you probably got your license from a cereal box. Yes, you did. The words were simple, but they landed like hammer blows. Harrison, for perhaps the first time in his career, looked genuinely ashamed. Mitchell appeared at his superior's elbow, his face ashen. Sir, she failed me at Top Gun. Twice. I said she got her license from a cereal box, and she's the reason I never made it as a fighter pilot. The reason you never made it, Emily said quietly, is that you weren't ready. You were too cocky, too impatient, too convinced of your own brilliance to listen to instruction. I failed you because passing you would have gotten you killed. Or worse, gotten your wingman killed. Mitchell opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. There was nothing he could say. Grant appeared beside Wheeler, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Told you she wasn't a civilian, sir. Yes, Master Chief, you did. Wheeler turned back to Emily. Commander Walsh, I think we need to continue this conversation somewhere more private. There are clearly details here that the general public doesn't need to hear. Emily nodded slowly. Agreed. But Admiral, I need you to understand something first. What's that? Whatever happened 5 years ago, whatever led to my disappearance, it's not over. The mission, the operation, the people involved, none of it is finished. She met his gaze squarely. And if my cover is blown here, if word gets out that Phantom is still alive, there are people who will come looking, people you don't want anywhere near this base. Wheeler's expression hardened. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you, there's a difference. The conference room was smaller this time, and more crowded. Wheeler sat at the head of the table, flanked by his senior staff. Torres stood against the wall, his eyes never leaving Emily. Harrison and Mitchell had been excluded. This conversation, Wheeler had decided, was above their clearance level. Grant stood by the door, his presence a silent acknowledgement that sometimes the most important witnesses were the ones no one noticed. Emily sat alone at the opposite end of the table, looking smaller than she had in the cockpit, as if the weight of revelation had physically diminished her. Start from the beginning, Wheeler said. Tell us everything. Emily was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but there was pain underneath it. Old pain, the kind that never fully healed. Operation Silent Storm, that's what started it all. She paused. August 15, 5 years ago, I was leading a training exercise in the South China Sea, routine stuff, when we picked up an emergency beacon. A Navy vessel, USS Henderson, had gone down in contested waters, survivors in the water. Torres stirred. I remember that. We were told it was an accident, equipment failure. That's what they wanted everyone to think. Emily's jaw tightened. It wasn't an accident, Jake. The Henderson was attacked by our own people. Wheeler leaned forward. Explain. There was a rogue element within the Navy. High-ranking officers, intelligence operatives, civilian contractors. I still don't know everyone who was involved. They had been running off-book operations in the South China Sea, things that would have caused an international incident if they had ever been exposed. The Henderson stumbled onto evidence of what they were doing, so they eliminated it. And you? I rescued 3 of the Henderson's crew before the cover-up could be completed. They told me everything. Gave me proof, documents, recordings, coordinates of where the evidence was hidden. Emily's voice dropped. But someone talked. Before I could get the information to anyone trustworthy, they came for me. The rogue element? Yes. They shot me down over international waters. I ejected, barely survived. By the time I washed up on a Philippine fishing boat, I was officially dead, and I realized that was the only thing keeping me alive. Torres pushed off the wall. So, you let us mourn you. You let your family, your friends, everyone who loved you, believe you were dead, for 5 years. For survival, Jake. If they'd known I was alive, they would have kept coming, and they wouldn't have just come for me. They'd have gone after anyone who might have helped me. Anyone I cared about. Her voice cracked slightly. I did what I had to do to protect the people I loved, even if it meant losing them. Wheeler processed this in silence. Then, the evidence you mentioned, do you still have it? Hidden. Somewhere they'll never find it. Insurance, in case they ever came looking again. And this rogue element, is it still active? I don't know. I've been off the grid for 5 years. But I've always known that someday, somehow, my cover would be blown. She looked around the table. Looks like today was that day. Wheeler was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached for his phone. "Sir," one of his aides asked, "I'm making a call to someone who needs to know about this." He looked at Emily. "Commander Walsh, you're going to have to trust me. I know people who have been investigating irregularities in South China Sea operations for years. If what you're saying is true, we might finally have a chance to bring these people to justice. And if you're wrong, if the people you trust are part of the conspiracy," Wheeler met her gaze steadily, "then we'll burn that bridge when we come to it. But I didn't get 3 stars by trusting the wrong people. You're going to have to take a leap of faith here, Commander." Emily was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. "One condition." "Name it." "Whatever happens next, I'm involved. I've been running for 5 years. I'm tired of running. It's time to fight back." Wheeler allowed himself a small smile. "Commander Walsh, I was hoping you'd say that." On the tarmac, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded Emily of fire, of explosions, of the last time she'd worn a military uniform. Torres found her standing by herself, watching the light fade. "Hey. Hey yourself." He stood beside her, close but not touching. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For what I said earlier. The anger, He struggled for words. 5 years, Emily. 5 years of thinking you were dead. Do you have any idea what that was like?" "I know exactly what it was like, Jake. I lived it too. Every day, knowing I couldn't contact anyone, couldn't let anyone know I was alive." Her voice caught. "I missed your wedding. I missed the birth of your daughter. I missed everything. And I hated every second of it." Torres was quiet for a moment. "Sarah talks about you sometimes. My daughter. She's never met you, but I've told her so many stories. About the legendary phantom who taught her daddy how to fly." Emily's eyes glistened. "I'd like to meet her someday. If that's something you'd be okay with." "Yeah." Torres's voice was thick. "Yeah, I think I'd be okay with that." They stood in silence, watching the sunset. "What happens now?" Torres asked finally. "I don't know. Wheeler's making calls, pulling strings. Something's going to happen. I can feel it. But what exactly?" She shrugged. "Your guess is as good as mine." "Are you scared?" Emily considered the question. "I've been scared for 5 years, Jake. At this point, it almost feels normal. But this is different. This feels like maybe there is a chance to finally end it, to come home for real. And if it doesn't work out, if this conspiracy is bigger than we think." She turned to face him, and for a moment she looked like the instructor he remembered, fierce, determined, absolutely certain of her path. "Then at least I'll go down fighting. That's got to be better than hiding." Torres smiled sadly. "That's the phantom I remember." Behind them, the operations building door opened. Wheeler emerged, his face grave but purposeful. "Commander Walsh, Commander Torres, there's been a development." They followed him back inside, where a secure video link had been established with the Pentagon. The face on the screen belonged to a man in his 60s, silver-haired, with the kind of bearing that spoke of decades at the highest levels of military command. "Commander Walsh," the man's voice was crisp, authoritative, "I've heard a great deal about you." Admiral McKenna. Emily recognized him immediately, the Chief of Naval Operations, the highest-ranking officer in the United States Navy. "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "As do I, Commander. As do I." McKenna leaned forward. "Admiral Wheeler has briefed me on your situation. Your claims about Operation Silent Storm are troubling, to say the least." "They're not claims, Admiral. They're facts." "So you say. But you've been underground for 5 years. You have no allies, no resources, no way to verify your story independently." McKenna paused. "Except for one thing." "Sir?" "The evidence you mentioned, the documents and recordings from the Henderson survivors. You said you still have them?" "Yes, sir." "Then we need to retrieve them, immediately. If what you're saying is true, we have a rogue element operating within the Navy, one that has already committed treason and murder to protect its secrets. We need to expose them before they can do any more damage." Emily nodded slowly. "I can get you the evidence, Admiral, but I'll need help. The location isn't exactly accessible, and if the conspiracy is as deep as I suspect, They'll be watching for any attempt to retrieve it, which is why you won't be going alone. McKenna's expression hardened. Commander Torres, you were one of Commander Walsh's best students, were you not? Torres straightened. Yes, sir. And you have access to aircraft capable of reaching wherever this evidence is hidden? Yes, sir. Good. Then you'll accompany Commander Walsh on this mission. I'm authorizing whatever resources you need, aircraft, equipment, personnel. We end this conspiracy once and for all. Emily and Torres exchanged glances. Sir, Emily said, I appreciate the support, but I need you to understand. This isn't going to be a simple retrieval operation. The people we're up against have killed before. They'll kill again to protect their secrets. I'm aware of the risks, Commander. McKenna's voice was grim. But sometimes the only way to eliminate a cancer is to cut it out completely. Whatever it takes, whatever the cost, we're going to bring these people to justice. He paused. Welcome back to the Navy, Commander Walsh. We've missed you. The video link terminated. Emily stood in silence, processing what had just happened. In the space of a few hours, she had gone from anonymous commercial pilot to the center of a military operation that could reshape the Navy's command structure. Torres put a hand on her shoulder. Ready for this? She looked at him, and for the first time since her world had fallen apart 5 years ago, she allowed herself to feel something that might have been hope. I've been ready for 5 years, Jake. Let's finish this. We're at the moment you've been waiting for, but before the biggest reveal, if this story has you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button right now. Every like helps this channel bring you more incredible stories of unsung heroes. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And stick around, because what Emily Walsh is about to reveal will change everything these officers thought they knew. Wheeler's office had become a war room. Maps covered every surface. Satellite imagery flickered on multiple screens, and the air hummed with the quiet tension of an operation taking shape. Emily stood at the center of it all, pointing to a location on the main display, a small island in the Philippine Sea, barely visible among the thousands of specks dotting the blue expanse. Here, she said, Palawan Province. There's a cave system on the northern coast that was used as a smuggling route during World War II. I cached the evidence there 5 years ago. Torres studied the imagery. That's deep in contested territory. Chinese naval patrols pass through that area regularly, which is why no one has found it. Emily traced the approach route with her finger. We'll need to go in low and fast, avoid radar detection, make the retrieval, and get out before anyone knows we were there. Wheeler frowned. That's a lot of variables. One mistake, and we could have an international incident on our hands. We could have an international incident regardless, Emily countered. The conspiracy we're trying to expose has been operating in those waters for years. If they catch wind of what we're doing, they'll move to intercept us. Then we need backup. Torres pulled up another screen. I can coordinate with the Reagan Strike Group. They can position assets to provide cover if things go sideways. The more people who know about this, the greater the chance of a leak. Emily shook her head. We keep this small. You, me, minimal support. Get in, get out, no witnesses. Wheeler looked between them. You're talking about a 2-person operation into hostile territory. That's not a mission. That's a suicide run. It's what I've been training for my entire life. Emily met his gaze squarely. Admiral, I spent 8 years teaching pilots how to survive the impossible. Let me show you. I practiced what I preached. Wheeler was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, Commander, you've got your mission. But I'm holding you personally responsible for bringing Commander Torres back in one piece. Is that understood? Crystal clear, sir. Torres grinned. Hey, don't I get a say in this? No, Emily and Wheeler said simultaneously. The preparation took the rest of the night. Torres coordinated with the Reagan to position support assets without revealing the true nature of the mission. Emily worked with the base armory to outfit them with the equipment they'd need. Survival gear, communication equipment, weapons for defense. Master Chief Grant found her in the hangar bay, checking over the F-18 that would carry them into hostile territory. Big day tomorrow, he said. Emily didn't look up from her inspection. Biggest of my life, again. You know, most people only get one of those. You seem to be collecting them. She smiled slightly. Lucky me. Grant was quiet for a moment. Then, I was wrong about you. Back on the plane, I mean. I could tell you were military, but I never imagined, well, this. Most people don't. That was kind of the point. I guess so. He shifted his weight. Listen, I know we just met, but be careful out there. The world needs more people like you, Commander. It'd be a shame to lose you again. Emily finally looked up. Thank you, Master Chief. That means more than you know. He nodded once, then turned and walked away. She watched him go, this gruff old sailor who had seen something in her that no one else had noticed. In another life, she would have been proud to serve alongside him. Maybe, if everything went well tomorrow, she still could. The sun rose over Anderson Air Force Base at 0547, painting the tarmac in shades of gold and rose. Emily stood by the waiting F-18, already suited up, watching the light break over the horizon. Torres joined her, helmet under his arm. Beautiful morning for a suicide mission. I prefer to think of it as a high-risk retrieval operation. Tomato, he paused. You ready for this? Emily looked at the aircraft, at the rising sun, at the future stretching out before her. Uncertain, dangerous, but for the first time in 5 years, filled with possibility. I've been ready for a long time, Jake. Let's go bring these people down. They climbed into the cockpit, the canopy closing over them with a soft hiss. The engines spooled up, filling the air with the familiar roar of barely contained power. Pacific Control, this is Whiskey 1-1, requesting clearance for departure. Whiskey 1-1, you are cleared for departure, runway 06 right. Good hunting. Torres glanced back at Emily in the rear seat. Here we go. Here we go. The F-18 surged forward, gathering speed, then lifted off into the morning sky. Below them, Anderson Air Force Base fell away, replaced by the endless blue of the Pacific Ocean. Ahead lay the evidence that could bring down a conspiracy 5 years in the making. Ahead lay the truth, and ahead lay a confrontation that would finally determine whether the ghost of Phantom would find peace or be buried for real. The flight to Palawan took 3 hours, most of it spent at wavetop altitude to avoid radar detection. Torres flew with the easy confidence of someone who had spent years pushing aircraft to their limits, while Emily navigated from the back seat, her eyes constantly scanning the horizon for threats. They passed over fishing boats and cargo ships, through scattered cloud banks and patches of tropical rain. The Philippine Sea stretched beneath them, beautiful and deadly, hiding secrets that went far deeper than the evidence they sought. Approaching the drop zone, Torres announced. 5 minutes to the cache location. Emily keyed her radio. Copy, let's do a quick recon pass before we commit to landing. They swept over the island at 500 feet, the FA-18's sensors drinking in every detail of the terrain below. The cave system Emily remembered was still there, its entrance hidden by decades of jungle growth, but unmistakable to someone who knew what to look for. I don't see any obvious threats, Torres reported. No boats, no personnel, no signs of recent activity. That's what worries me. Emily studied the sensor readouts. This place should be empty, but I've learned to trust my instincts, and right now, they're screaming at me. Torres circled the island once more, then found a relatively flat stretch of beach, suitable for landing. The F-18 touched down smoothly, its landing gear digging into the soft sand. Nice landing, Emily acknowledged. Thanks, I had a good teacher. They climbed out of the aircraft, weapons ready, senses alert for any sign of ambush. The jungle around them was alive with bird calls and insect sounds, the peaceful backdrop hiding whatever dangers might lurk within. The cave is about half a mile inland, Emily said, checking her bearings. Follow me. They moved through the jungle in silence, Emily leading the way with the sure-footed confidence of someone who had survived worse environments than this. Torres covered their rear, his eyes constantly scanning for threats. The cave entrance was exactly where Emily remembered it, a narrow opening in a cliff face, partially obscured by hanging vines and fallen rocks. She pushed through the vegetation, Torres close behind, and descended into darkness. The interior of the cave was cool and damp, the air thick with the smell of ancient stone and sea spray. Emily activated her flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom, to reveal a narrow passage leading deeper into the cliff. This way. They walked for several minutes, the passage twisting and turning, occasionally opening into larger chambers before narrowing again. Finally, they reached a small alcove set into the cave wall. Emily reached behind a loose stone and pulled out a waterproof container. There it is! Her voice was hushed, reverent. 5 years I've been waiting to retrieve this. She opened the container, checking its contents. Inside, perfectly preserved, were the documents and recordings she had risked everything to protect. the evidence that could finally bring the conspiracy to light. "We got it," Torres breathed. "We actually got it." "Not yet." Emily closed the container and stowed it in her pack. "We're not done until we're back at Anderson with this evidence in Admiral Wheeler's hands." They retraced their steps through the cave, moving quickly but carefully. The extraction had been too easy, Emily thought. After 5 years of running, of hiding, of waiting for the other shoe to drop, this couldn't be all there was. Her instincts were right. They emerged from the cave to find 3 men waiting for them, weapons drawn. "Commander Walsh," the leader's voice was cold, clinical. "We've been looking for you for a very long time." Emily's hand moved toward her weapon, but stopped when she felt the laser sight on her chest. "I wouldn't," the leader said. "We've been authorized to kill you if necessary. But we'd prefer to take you alive. You have information we need." Torres had frozen beside her, his own hand hovering near his sidearm. "Who are you?" Emily demanded. The leader smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "You know who we are, Commander. You've known for 5 years. The only question now is whether you're going to come quietly or whether we have to make this difficult." Emily's mind raced through options. 3 hostiles, well-armed, professional. The FA-18 was half a mile away. Even if they could fight their way out, they'd never make it to the aircraft before reinforcements arrived. But there was another option. "Jake," she said quietly, "when I move, run for the plane. Don't look back." "Emily." "That's an order, Commander." Before Torres could respond, Emily moved. She dove left, drawing her weapon and firing in a single fluid motion. The first hostile went down, clutching his shoulder. The second scrambled for cover, his shots going wide. "Go!" Emily shouted. Torres ran. Behind him, he heard more gunfire. Emily's weapon, return fire from the remaining hostiles. He wanted to turn back, to help her, but her orders had been clear. He burst out of the jungle onto the beach, sprinting for the F-18 with everything he had. Behind him, the gunfire stopped. Torres reached the aircraft, threw himself into the cockpit, and slammed his hand on the engine start. The turbines roared to life. He looked back toward the jungle. Nothing. No movement, no sign of Emily. His hand hovered over the throttle. Every instinct screamed at him to go back, to find her, to save her the way she had saved him so many times before. But if he didn't get the evidence back to Wheeler, everything she'd sacrificed would be for nothing. "I'm sorry," he whispered. He pushed the throttle forward. The F-18 leaped into the sky, leaving the island and Emily behind. The F-18 tore through the sky at 500 knots, but to Commander Jake Torres, it felt like crawling through molasses. Every mile between him and that island was another mile of failure, another mile of betrayal, another mile of leaving behind the woman who had taught him everything he knew about survival. His radio crackled with static, then cleared. "Whiskey 1-1, this is Reagan's strike group. We're tracking your return vector." "Status report?" Torres's throat was tight. "Reagan, Whiskey 1-1, package retrieved, but we have a situation. Phantom is down. Hostile contact at the retrieval site. She stayed behind to cover my extraction." Silence on the radio. Then, "Copy, Whiskey 1-1, are you declaring her KIA?" "Negative." Torres's jaw clenched. "I'm declaring her MIA. She was alive when I left. I'm not writing her off until I see a body." "Understood. Be advised, Admiral Wheeler is requesting immediate debrief upon your arrival. Reagan is repositioning to provide SAR support if authorization is granted. Search and rescue, as if they could just fly back into hostile territory and pluck Emily out of whatever situation she'd gotten herself into." But Torres had seen her fight before. He'd seen her survive situations that would have killed anyone else. If anyone could make it out of that ambush alive, it was Phantom. He had to believe that. He had to. The flight back to Anderson took an eternity. Torres landed hard, not caring about the rough touchdown, and was out of the cockpit before the engines had fully spun down. Admiral Wheeler was waiting on the tarmac, his face grave. "Commander, the package?" Torres handed over the waterproof container. "It's all there, sir. Everything she cached 5 years ago. Documents, recordings, coordinates, enough to blow this conspiracy wide open." Wheeler took the container, but his eyes remained on Torres. "And Commander Walsh?" "Ambushed at the extraction site. 3 hostiles, maybe more. She engaged them to cover my escape." Torres' voice cracked. "Sir, we have to go back for her." "We will," Wheeler's tone was firm. "But first, We need to secure this evidence and coordinate a proper rescue operation. If we go in half-cocked, we'll just get more people killed. With respect, Admiral, every minute we waste is another minute she's in enemy hands. I'm aware of the timeline, Commander. Wheeler's eyes softened slightly. But Commander Walsh gave you an order. She told you to run because she knew the evidence was more important than any single life, including her own. If we throw that sacrifice away by mounting a sloppy rescue, we dishonor everything she fought for. Torres wanted to argue. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to get back in that cockpit and fly straight back to Palawan. Consequences be damned. But Wheeler was right. Emily would never forgive him if he got himself killed trying to save her. "Yes, sir," he said finally. "What are your orders?" Wheeler turned toward the operations building. "First, we analyze this evidence. Then we figure out exactly who we're dealing with. And then," his voice hardened, "we go get our pilot back." The evidence was everything Emily had promised and more. Documents detailing off-book operations in the South China Sea, including weapons transfers, intelligence sharing with foreign nationals, and the deliberate sinking of the USS Henderson to cover up the conspiracy's activities. Audio recordings of high-ranking officers discussing their plans in coded language that, once deciphered, revealed the full scope of their treachery. And names. Dozens of names, from junior officers to admirals, from intelligence operatives to civilian contractors. A network that stretched across the Pacific Fleet and into the halls of the Pentagon itself. "This is worse than I imagined," Wheeler muttered, scrolling through the decoded files. "If even half of this is accurate, we're looking at the biggest treason case since the Cold War." Torres stood behind him, arms crossed. "Sir, with respect, we can analyze this later. Right now, we need to focus on getting Commander Walsh back." "We are focusing on that, Commander." Wheeler pulled up a satellite image of Palawan. "But we need to know what we're walking into. If these conspirators have Emily, they'll be expecting a rescue attempt. We need to outthink them." Master Chief Grant appeared in the doorway. "Admiral, we've got something." "What is it?" "Signal intercept from the Philippine Sea. Someone's broadcasting on an old Navy frequency, one that hasn't been used in 5 years. Wheeler and Torres exchanged glances. "Phantom's frequency," Torres said. "She's alive. She's signaling us." Grant nodded. "The message is garbled, but we've been able to piece together a location. She's not on Palawan anymore. They have moved her to a ship, a cargo vessel, currently heading northeast toward international waters." "They're trying to get her out of the region," Wheeler realized. "Once they're in international waters, our options become severely limited. Then we intercept them before they get there." Torres was already moving toward the door. "I can be airborne in 10 minutes. "Hold on, Commander." Wheeler's voice stopped him. "You're not going alone this time. I'm authorizing a full strike package, 2 FA-18s for air support, plus a helicopter insertion team for the actual rescue. We do this right, or we don't do it at all." Torres hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, sir." "Good. Briefing in 15 minutes. And, Commander," Wheeler's expression softened slightly, "we're going to get her back. I promise you that." The briefing was quick and precise. The target was a cargo vessel called the Eastern Promise, currently 150 miles northeast of Palawan and heading for international waters at 15 knots. Satellite imagery showed armed personnel on deck and what appeared to be defensive weapons systems disguised as cargo equipment. "They're expecting trouble," the intelligence officer reported. "Heat signatures indicate at least 20 personnel on board, plus whatever crew the ship normally carries. Commander Walsh is most likely being held below decks, probably in the cargo hold." Torres studied the imagery. "What about air defenses?" "Unknown. We're seeing what might be portable SAM systems, but we can't confirm. Recommend approaching low and fast to minimize radar exposure." "Rules of engagement?" one of the other pilots asked. Wheeler stepped forward. "Weapons free on any hostile target, but our primary objective is the recovery of Commander Walsh. Everything else is secondary." The helicopter insertion team leader, a hard-faced woman named Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, spoke up. "Sir, what's the contingency if the ship scuttles before we can extract her?" "It won't." Wheeler's voice was iron. "That ship does not go down until Commander Walsh is off it. Is that understood?" A chorus of affirmatives echoed through the room. "Then let's move." "We launch in 30 minutes. The strike package lifted off from Anderson at 14:37 hours. 2 FA-18s flying escort, plus a MH-60 Seahawk carrying the 8-person rescue team. Torres led the formation, his eyes fixed on the horizon, his mind on the woman waiting for rescue. "Whiskey Flight, this is Reagan Actual," the carrier's commander radioed. "Be advised, we've repositioned to provide emergency support if needed. You are cleared hot. Bring our people home." "Copy, Reagan. Whiskey Flight is inbound." The flight took 45 minutes, the aircraft skimming the wavetops to avoid radar detection. As they approached the target area, Torres's sensors began picking up the cargo ship's silhouette, a dark shape against the afternoon sun, moving steadily toward international waters. "Tally target," he announced. "Eastern Promise, bearing 045, distance 12 miles, commencing attack run." The FA-18s split formation, approaching the ship from opposite directions to divide its defensive attention. Torres watched his threat display carefully, waiting for the telltale flash of radar lock that would indicate SAM activation. It came at 8 miles, a brief spike of energy as the ship's hidden weapons systems came online. "Missile launch! Braking left!" Torres threw the F-18 into a hard turn, flares cascading from its belly as the incoming missile streaked past. Behind him, his wingman executed a similar maneuver, both aircraft dancing through the sky as the ship's defenses tried to track them. "Whiskey 2, engaging defensive systems," his wingman reported. A moment later, a streak of fire lanced down from the sky, and one of the SAM launchers exploded in a shower of sparks. "Good hit. Primary defenses neutralized." Torres pulled his aircraft around for another pass. "Seahawk, you're clear for approach. We'll keep them busy up here." "Copy, Whiskey. Beginning insertion run." The helicopter swept in low over the water, its door gunners laying down suppressive fire as it approached the cargo ship's deck. Armed personnel scattered, some returning fire, others diving for cover as the rescue team fast-roped down onto the vessel. Torres watched through his targeting display as the team hit the deck and immediately began moving toward the cargo hold. Lieutenant Commander Chen led the way, her team flowing behind her like a well-oiled machine. "Whiskey, this is insertion team. We're on deck and moving to target location. Heavy resistance expected." "Copy, insertion team. We've got your back." The next few minutes were chaos. Torres and his wingman made repeated strafing runs, keeping the ship's defenders pinned down while the rescue team fought their way below decks. Radio chatter filled his ears, shouts, gunfire, the occasional explosion as flashbang grenades cleared compartments. Then, finally, "Whiskey, this is insertion team. We have the package. Repeat, we have the package." "Commander Walsh is alive." Torres let out a breath he hadn't realized he had been holding. "Copy, insertion team. What's her status?" A pause, then Chen's voice, slightly softer. "She's been roughed up, but she's mobile. She's actually helping us clear compartments. Says she's not leaving until the mission is complete." Despite everything, Torres found himself smiling. That was Emily, all right. Even captured, beaten, and outnumbered, she refused to be a passive victim. "Tell her the cavalry's here. Time to go home." The extraction was messy but successful. The rescue team fought their way back to the deck, Emily in their midst, and loaded onto the Seahawk under covering fire from the FA-18s. As the helicopter lifted off, Torres made one final pass over the ship, watching as secondary explosions began to ripple through its hull. Someone had set scuttling charges. The conspirators were trying to destroy the evidence of their operation, but they were too late. Emily was safe, the evidence was secure, and the conspiracy was about to come crashing down. "All aircraft, this is Whiskey Lead. Mission accomplished. RTB." The flight back to the Reagan was the longest and shortest of Torres's life. Long because every minute felt like an hour, waiting to confirm that Emily was truly safe. Short because he knew that when they landed, the real work would begin. The debriefings, the investigations, the slow and painful process of bringing the conspirators to justice. The Seahawk touched down on the Reagan's flight deck at 17:42 hours. Torres landed minutes later, barely waiting for his aircraft to stop rolling before he was out of the cockpit and sprinting toward the helicopter. Emily was sitting on the deck, a medical blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her face bruised and her arm in a makeshift sling. But she was alive. She was whole. And when she saw Torres running toward her, she smiled. "Took you long enough," she said. Torres dropped to his knees beside her, pulling her into a careful embrace. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I left you." "You followed orders," her voice was gentle. "That's what I trained you to do." "I know, but..." "No buts." She pulled back, meeting his eyes. You got the evidence out. That's what mattered. Everything else was secondary. Torres shook his head. You're not secondary, Emily. You never were. Before she could respond, Admiral Wheeler appeared, his face a mixture of relief and determination. Commander Walsh, it's good to have you back. Emily struggled to her feet, Torres supporting her. It's good to be back, Admiral, but we're not done yet. No, we're not. Wheeler's expression hardened. The evidence you retrieved has already been transmitted to Admiral McKenna in Washington. Arrests are being made as we speak. By morning, this conspiracy will be completely dismantled. And the people who captured me? In custody. The ones who survived anyway. Wheeler paused. You did good work out there, Commander. Both of you. Emily looked at Torres, then back at Wheeler. Sir, there's something you should know. While they had me, they talked. They thought I wasn't going to survive, so they got careless. The conspiracy isn't just about the South China Sea operations. It goes deeper. There's something else they were protecting. Something they called Project Nightfall. Wheeler's eyes narrowed. Project Nightfall? I don't know the details, but from what I gathered, it's bigger than anything we've uncovered so far, and it's still active. The Admiral was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. We'll deal with that. But first, you need medical attention. He gestured to the waiting corpsman. Get Commander Walsh to sickbay. Full workup. I want to know exactly what those hostiles did to her. Sir? That's an order, Commander. Wheeler's voice softened. You've done enough for one day. Let someone else carry the weight for a while. Emily wanted to argue. Torres could see it in her eyes, but exhaustion finally won out. She nodded, allowing the corpsman to guide her toward the ship's medical facilities. Torres watched her go, then turned back to Wheeler. Admiral, what happens now? Now, we follow the evidence wherever it leads. Wheeler's gaze was fixed on the horizon, where the sun was beginning to set. This conspiracy has been operating for years, corrupting good officers, destroying lives, threatening our national security. We're going to root out every last trace of it. And Emily? Wheeler was quiet for a moment. Then, that depends on her. She's been running for 5 years, hiding from enemies she couldn't fight. Now those enemies are exposed. She has a choice to make. Go back to her civilian life, or return to the Navy that failed to protect her. What do you think she'll choose? The Admiral smiled slightly. I think you know the answer to that, Commander. Torres did know. He'd known from the moment he had first seen her in that cockpit, fighting off Migs with nothing but skill and determination. Emily Walsh wasn't the kind of person who walked away from a fight. She never had been. The next 72 hours were a whirlwind of activity. The evidence Emily had retrieved led to arrests across the Pacific Fleet. 3 admirals, 7 captains, and dozens of junior officers and enlisted personnel, all connected to the conspiracy that had been operating in the shadows for nearly a decade. The media called it the biggest military scandal since Tailhook. Congressional hearings were announced. The Secretary of the Navy issued a statement promising a complete review of fleet operations. And through it all, Emily remained at the center of the storm, providing testimony, identifying conspirators, and slowly emerging from the shadow identity she'd worn for 5 years. Colonel Harrison requested a private meeting with her on the second day. He arrived looking uncomfortable, his earlier arrogance replaced by genuine contrition. Commander Walsh! He stood at attention, as if she were his superior officer. I owe you an apology. Emily was sitting in the Reagan's officer's mess, a cup of coffee growing cold in front of her. The bruises on her face had faded to ugly yellows and greens, but the arm was still in a sling. At ease, Colonel. What's on your mind? I was wrong about you. The words seemed to cost him something. On that aircraft, I dismissed you because of how you looked, because you were a woman, because you didn't fit my idea of what a capable pilot should be. He paused. I've spent 30 years in the military, and I should have known better. Yes, you should have. Harrison flinched, but didn't look away. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, but I wanted you to know that I've learned something from this experience, and I am going to do better. Emily studied him for a long moment. Then slowly, she extended her hand. That's all any of us can do, Colonel. Learn and do better. He shook her hand, and something shifted between them. Not friendship exactly, but mutual respect. The kind that came from shared experience and acknowledged mistakes. After he left, Lieutenant Mitchell appeared in the doorway. He looked even more uncomfortable than Harrison had, His earlier cockiness completely evaporated. "Ma'am, can I speak with you?" Emily gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit down, Lieutenant." Mitchell sat, his hands clasped nervously in front of him. "Commander, I need to apologize. The things I said on that plane, calling you a coffee fetcher, saying you got your license from a cereal box." He shook his head. "I was an idiot." "You were," Emily agreed. "And you were right to fail me at Top Gun, both times." He met her eyes. "I wasn't ready. I thought I was, but I wasn't. I was too cocky, too convinced of my own brilliance. If you'd passed me, I probably would have gotten myself killed. Or worse, gotten my wingman killed. That's why I failed you. I know that now." Mitchell took a deep breath. "Ma'am, I know I don't deserve it, but if you ever teach again, if you ever go back to Top Gun, I'd like another chance. A real chance. This time, I'm ready to learn." Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled slightly. "We'll see, Lieutenant. We'll see." The conspiracy's full scope became clear over the following days. Project Nightfall, it turned out, was exactly what Emily had feared. A deeper, more insidious operation that went beyond simple treason. The conspirators had been working with foreign intelligence services, sharing classified information in exchange for personal enrichment and political power. Admiral McKenna flew out to the Reagan personally to oversee the final phase of the investigation. He met with Emily in Wheeler's conference room, the evidence spread out on the table between them. "Commander Walsh, the Navy owes you a debt we can never fully repay." McKenna's voice was grave. "You sacrificed 5 years of your life to protect this evidence. You endured capture and interrogation rather than give up the information. You are, without question, one of the bravest officers I've ever had the privilege to serve with." "I was just doing my job, Admiral." "No," McKenna shook his head. "You were doing far more than your job. You were protecting the integrity of the service you loved, even when that service had failed you." He paused. "Which is why I'd like to offer you a choice." Emily's eyes narrowed. "What kind of choice?" "You can return to civilian life. We'll restore your identity, clear your record, and ensure that you are financially compensated for everything you've lost. You can go back to flying commercial aircraft or do whatever else you want with your life. No one would blame you for choosing peace after everything you've been through." "And the alternative?" McKenna smiled slightly. "The alternative is that you come back to us, not just to the Navy, to Top Gun. We need instructors like you, Commander, pilots who can teach the next generation not just how to fly, but how to think, how to survive. How to be the kind of officers this nation needs." Emily looked out the window at the flight deck below, where FA-18s were being prepared for launch. The familiar sounds of naval aviation, engine roars, shouted commands, the rhythmic thud of catapult launches filled her ears like music. "I spent 5 years running," she said quietly. 5 years hiding. 5 years pretending to be someone I wasn't. And now," she turned back to face him, "now I'm ready to come home." The ceremony took place 2 weeks later at Naval Air Station Miramar, the home of Top Gun, the place where Emily had spent 8 years training the best pilots in the world before everything had fallen apart. The hangar was packed with officers, enlisted personnel, and civilians, all gathered to witness something unprecedented: the reinstatement of an officer who had been officially dead for 5 years. Admiral McKenna presided, with Wheeler and Torres standing at attention nearby. "Lieutenant Commander Emily Walsh," McKenna announced, his voice carrying across the silent hangar, "for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of life above and beyond the call of duty, I am authorized by the President of the United States to award you the Navy Cross." He pinned the medal to her chest, the second highest award for valor in the Navy. Emily stood at attention, her dress whites immaculate, her face composed. "Additionally," McKenna continued, "in recognition of your exceptional service and sacrifice, you are hereby promoted to the rank of Commander, United States Navy." A murmur rippled through the crowd as the new insignia was placed on her shoulders. Commander, a rank she had earned through blood and sacrifice, through 5 years of exile and a lifetime of service. "Finally," McKenna said, "it is my distinct pleasure to announce that Commander Walsh has accepted a position as Senior Instructor at the Naval Fighter Weapons School, where she will continue to train the finest pilots in the world." The hangar erupted in applause. Emily allowed herself a small smile as she looked out at the crowd, at Wheeler, nodding with approval, at Torres, grinning like a proud brother, at Master Chief Grant, who had somehow wrangled an invitation and was clapping louder than anyone. Even Harrison was there, applauding with genuine respect. After the ceremony, Torres found her standing alone on the tarmac, looking up at the stars. "Commander Walsh," he grinned, "has a nice ring to it." "It does, doesn't it?" She turned to face him. "Jake, I wanted to thank you. For everything. For coming back for me. For not giving up. You would have done the same for me." "I would have." She paused. "How's Sarah, your daughter?" Torres's face lit up. "She's amazing, growing like a weed, asking when she can meet the famous Phantom." He hesitated. "She's on base, actually. Flew in with my wife for the ceremony. If you wanted to meet her." Emily's eyes softened. "I'd like that very much." They walked together toward the base housing, where a young woman and a little girl were waiting. The girl, 5 years old, with her father's dark hair and her mother's bright eyes, broke into a run when she saw Torres approaching. "Daddy!" Torres scooped her up, laughing. "Hey, Munchkin, there's someone I want you to meet." He turned to Emily. "Sarah, this is Commander Walsh. She's the pilot I told you about." The little girl studied Emily with serious eyes. "Are you really Phantom?" Emily knelt down to the girl's level. "I am. Daddy says you taught him how to fly." "I did? Can you teach me too?" Emily looked up at Torres, then back at the earnest little face before her. Something warm bloomed in her chest. Hope, perhaps, or peace, or simply the joy of being part of something larger than herself again. "Tell you what," she said. "When you're old enough, you come find me. I'll teach you everything I know." Sarah's face split into a grin that was pure Torres. "Promise?" "Promise." That night, Emily stood alone in her new quarters at Miramar, looking at the few possessions she'd managed to accumulate over 5 years of hiding. A Pacific Airways uniform, now permanently retired. A challenge coin with the Phantom insignia, worn smooth from years of handling. A photograph of her Top Gun class from 8 years ago, the faces young and bright and full of possibility. So many of those faces were gone now, lost to the conspiracy, to combat, to the 1,000 ways that military life could break a person. But she had survived. Against all odds, against every obstacle, she had survived. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered it. "Commander Walsh?" The voice was familiar, the same voice from the cargo ship, the leader of the hostile team that had captured her. But there was something different in his tone now, something almost respectful. "I thought you were in custody," Emily said. "I was. I'm not anymore." A pause. "I wanted you to know this isn't over. Project Nightfall was just the beginning. There are other operations, other networks, other threats, things that go far deeper than anything you've uncovered." "Is that a threat?" "It's an invitation." The voice was almost amused. "You impressed me, Commander. Not many people could have survived what you went through and come out the other side intact. The people I work for, they could use someone like you." "I already have a job." "Do you? Training pilots at Top Gun?" A soft laugh. "That's beneath you, and we both know it. You were born for something more." Emily's jaw tightened. "Who are you?" "Someone who's been watching you for a very long time. Someone who knows what you're really capable of." A pause. "Think about it, Commander. The Navy will use you up and throw you away, just like they did before. We're offering you something different, something meaningful. I don't make deals with traitors." "We're not traitors, Commander. We're patriots. We just see the world differently than the people currently in charge." The voice softened. "You have my number now. When you're ready to learn the truth, the real truth, about what happened in the South China Sea, call me." The line went dead. Emily stared at the phone for a long moment. Then, slowly, she set it down on the desk. The conspiracy was broken. The conspirators were in custody. She had her life back, her identity back, her purpose back. But the voice on the phone had been right about one thing. This wasn't over. There were still secrets buried in the darkness, still threats lurking in the shadows. And somewhere out there, someone was watching her, waiting. She walked to the window and looked out at the runway, where the lights of Miramar glittered like earthbound stars. Tomorrow she would begin her new life as a Top Gun instructor. Tomorrow she would start training the next generation of naval aviators. But tonight, she allowed herself to wonder, what truth was still waiting to be discovered? What secrets had the conspiracy been protecting? And why, after everything, did she feel like the real story was only beginning? Her phone buzzed again. This time, the caller ID showed Admiral Wheeler. "Commander Walsh, I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all, Admiral. What can I do for you?" "There's been a development. Something related to the files you retrieved." Wheeler's voice was careful, measured. "We found a reference to something called Nightfall Prime. It appears to be a subset of the larger operation, something that was kept secret even from the other conspirators." Emily's blood ran cold. "What kind of subset?" "We don't know yet. The files are heavily encrypted, and whoever created them used security protocols we've never seen before." A pause. "But there's one thing we can confirm. The operation is still active, and it's based somewhere in the Pacific." "What are you asking me, Admiral?" "I'm asking if you're ready to go back into the field, Commander. If you're ready to finish what you started 5 years ago." Emily looked at the challenge coin on her desk, at the photograph of her old class, at the uniform hanging in her closet. She had spent 5 years running, 5 years hiding, 5 years pretending to be someone she wasn't. Now she was home. Now she had the resources of the Navy behind her. Now she had allies she could trust. "When do we start?" she asked. "Yawked. Tomorrow, 0600. I'll send you the briefing files." Wheeler paused. "And Commander, welcome back to the fight." The line disconnected. Emily set down the phone and walked to her closet. Her new flight suit hung there, freshly issued, with the phantom patch already sewn onto the shoulder. Some ghosts, she thought, don't stay buried, and some ghosts were never meant to rest. She pulled on the flight suit, feeling the familiar weight of it settle onto her shoulders like armor. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new dangers, new mysteries to unravel. But tonight, for the first time in 5 years, she knew exactly who she was. Not a civilian pilot hiding from her past. Not a ghost haunting the margins of a conspiracy. Not a victim of circumstances beyond her control. She was Commander Emily Walsh, call sign Phantom, naval aviator, Top Gun instructor, and the woman who had survived the unsurvivable. And she was just getting started. What an incredible journey. If Emily Walsh's story moved you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another tale of hidden warriors. Drop a comment below and tell us, have you ever met someone whose true identity surprised you? And share this video with a friend who appreciates stories of quiet strength. More untold hero stories coming soon. Thank you for watching until the end. Outside her window, the first light of dawn was beginning to paint the horizon in shades of gold and rose. A new day was coming, a new mission was waiting, and somewhere in the darkness, the truth was waiting to be found. Emily picked up her challenge coin one last time, feeling its weight in her palm. Then she slipped it into her pocket and headed for the door. The past 5 years had been about survival. The next chapter would be about justice, and this time, she wouldn't be fighting alone. Emily Walsh's journey teaches us a profound truth that echoes far beyond the cockpit of that Boeing 737. The people we dismiss, overlook, and underestimate are often the ones carrying the heaviest burdens and the greatest capabilities. Every day we encounter ordinary people, the barista who makes our coffee, the janitor who cleans our offices, the quiet coworker who never speaks up in meetings. We judge them by their job titles, their appearance, their silence. But behind those unassuming exteriors may lie stories of sacrifice, courage, and strength that would humble us if we only knew. Emily spent 5 years hiding in plain sight, enduring mockery from people who assumed they were superior simply because they wore shinier uniforms or spoke louder words. Yet when crisis struck, it was the coffee-fetching co-pilot who saved 287 lives. The lesson is clear. Never judge a book by its cover. Never assume that quiet means weak, that humble means incapable, that different means less than. True strength doesn't advertise itself. True heroes rarely wear capes, and true warriors often fight their greatest battles in complete silence, asking for neither recognition nor reward. So, here's your challenge. The next time you meet someone ordinary, pause, look deeper, listen harder. You might just be standing in the presence of someone extraordinary. And if you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed, remember Emily Walsh. Your moment is coming. Stay ready.